to the bench. We didn't fuck it up this time.
We didn't.
We didn't. Go us. Go us. We have
Oh yeah.
we have a great show for you today. We messed with the format a little bit. We're gonna start with some announcements. Here we go. Here we go. To agenda. We're gonna start with some announcements first, and intro mixing is much better. Thank you. I've been working on it. I've been trying. So let's go into these announcements first and foremost. Well, I screwed this all up already. Horace, how are you?
Doing great.
How are you? How are you doing? How's
I'm
your day?
doing great.
Love to hear it.
How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good.
I had a great job interview today. I'm looking forward. We're going to be playing some.
Oh shit! Thank you for reminding me. I'm gonna
you.
set a reminder on my phone to install something for work later.
Do it. Do it. Do it right now. We're going to be playing some Space Marines too. I might even stream it. I might even not exit the stream and just immediately transfer over to playing Space Marines.
Straight into
So that
Marines.
can happen. All right, announcement number 1. Here we go. The promo. We have decided to extend the promo. It is now, you have until September 15th to do your best WWE promo. I know I've got some bench members that are coming in. I might do a second one. I'm not sure. So this is gonna be super cool. So you got until the 15th. Remember, send your bench WWE promo to me directly via YouTube link. We'll be good to go. Heck yeah. Second, what are we doing next week? Well, next week we're doing the drip check at EQ. So Cord is going to be at EQ. We're going to be streaming at our normal time, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. And everybody wear your best drip if you're going to EQ. And Cord's going to do a drip check. We have a hype chest. How does that work? Hey, we got a new emote or something. I'm happy you're here too. Pause. So, God, I'm so distractible today. We're doing a drip check Thursday at EQ. If you're going to EQ, make sure that you've got your best garb on Thursday, which is kind of weird, and you could be featured on the show. All right, drip check. Also, big huge announcement. The Bench is turning into the Bench Network. I know, it brings a tear to my eye too. The Bench is turning into the Bench Network because on Tuesdays we've got Goblin Storytime. Goblin Storytime is an hour of Belgarth stories, tales, and lore. It's narrated by Master Chronicler Cord and potentially other creators in the future. This is going to be every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central, and it's going to be here on the Bench Twitch network. So you go to the same actual link that you would follow to watch us on Thursdays, and you can watch Goblin Storytime on Tuesdays. We're going to be doing our best to support that show. We might be adding some additional shows in the future. We've had some talk about some other potential shows. So the idea is we've got enough spoons to do one show, but there's some other creators, and we could turn this into like a whole network or something like that. That's kind of the idea. Just come to this link, the Bench Belgarth, and there might be some kind of Belgarth programming. In the future, maybe we'll have like 5 or 6 shows. I don't know. Anything to add on that? Any questions? No. Okay.
I don't have any.
This is your thing right here. So we got some upcoming events.
Yes.
Take it away.
So this weekend is Numenor Opener. If you're anywhere near Champaign, Illinois, you should come out and fight and see Squire Revell get knighted. And then next weekend,
I'll be there also.
Yes. I didn't actually know that. That's awesome. I'm excited.
I'm going to be there.
Hell yeah. And then next weekend is also Equinox for Belgarth down in Tennessee. I wish I could make it. Monty Bell State Park. Great event. Amtgard, I believe, Keep on the Borderlands is also next week.
Yes.
And very close to Champaign, Illinois, Monticello, Illinois. And then Oktoberfest Not actually Bellegarde's biggest events anymore. I think Armageddon is a little bit bigger now, but still giant camping event run by My Realm Numenor, out at Billy Creek in Indiana, October 2nd through October 6th. Come fight. It's a lot of fun. Great night fighting. My squire Elias is also getting knighted. Come participate in his trial. He has to beat you when you have a poison blade and you get armor.
Heck
So
yeah.
it'll be a lot of fun.
We're going to
Um,
go ahead.
oh, and also if you ever have any events, please let us know ahead of time if there's events happening. We'd like to announce more events on the bench every week so that people know where to go fight.
Heck yeah. I will be at Oktoberfest on Saturday because I have a wedding, but we're going to be doing a live show Thursday of Oktoberfest. And we're gonna have I don't off the top of my head I don't remember because my brain is mush today, but we're gonna have a member of the bench that's gonna be on because you're not showing up Thursday, right? To Oktoberfest, Horace.
I'll be there
Oh,
Thursday.
you will be there Thursday. All right, Horace
Yeah.
will be there on Thursday, and we'll be doing a live on the scene kind of thing at 6 p.m. Hopefully, get some ditching or something like that. I'll be in the studio and kind of doing my thing, doing the voiceover stuff, and then I will see everybody Saturday when I show up. Now that they are waiting patiently, have been waiting patiently for a minute, let's introduce our guest today. Welcome, guests. We have, let me make sure I got these titles right. We have Warlord Sir Peter the Quick, and we have Myst D. Welcome to the
Hello.
bench. For our
Welcome.
for our agenda today, we've already met Misty in a previous show. So real quick, Misty, do you have anything new to share for your fans on the bench?
Nada. If you didn't see it, go watch the grind to get the little backstory. But
Heck yeah. So our agenda today, we're gonna say who is Peter the Quick. We're gonna ask everybody, why do you two stick? What is your flow philosophy? What are some tips and tricks in regards specifically to two stick or Florentine? And then we're gonna just open it up to the chat and ask some questions. So starting things off, who is Peter the Quick? It's your space. Take it away.
Okay. Who is Peter the Quick? Well, I gotta tell you, I watched, listened to a couple of the bench podcasts this morning, kind of preparing for what this would be like or what the expectation was. Um, so I had a couple good laughs at your guys' stories. Um, so who is Peter the Quick? Well, I started fighting in Dagger here in 2001. It would have been pre-split. Shortly thereafter, the split happened, and Belagarth was born. We were a Belagarth realm, so then I primarily fought Belagarth. I fought at the beginning. I fought. I told somebody this the other day, and they were kind of surprised, but I fought Red Sword, like a mid-length red, for the first like 9 months, and then I went to my first Oktoberfest and Spring War, and I fell in love with a small shield. So I fought with like a 22-inch round shield and a sword pointed down. And I stuck with that for quite a long time. You wanted like unit talks too, right? Like what kind of units I was in and things.
Yeah.
So for a short period of time, there was a unit that was like so when Iowa became like hit the fighting scene, there was a group. At first, we weren't exactly like loved when we showed up because nobody likes like change that they don't make, and we were kind of like a larger group that just kind of showed up out of nowhere. Um, um, and actually, in point of that, I have to digress a little bit because my origin story, Tanith, is really sort of similar to yours. Um, so when I was 13, exactly what you said you were,
Wild.
I went and visited my cousin in Champaign Urbana for like a spring break. Like that's where I stayed with them for a week with my aunt and my cousin. And that weekend rolled around and my cousin was like, Aaron, you got to come play this game where we like hit each other with foam covered swords. And it's like so much fun. Well, so he took me to an early version of DAG, which at the time was called like Sword and Axe. And I fought as a hobbit, so I had rocks because I was under 16 and I was over 13. So I had a sword and a little shield. And so my first experience with foam fighting was back when I was 13, and it was like this like marvelous experience, right? Like what you had, Tanith. Like it was amazing. It was everything I ever hoped in a game that I could possibly find and what it would be. And I loved it, and it just kind of stuck with me. Um, and then I never ran into it again until my freshman year of college, and I saw a guy. A Hobbit quick, yep. But I saw a guy walking into the dorm carrying some foam fighting gear, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I know what that is. And I ran over to him. His name was Zypher, or his name was Matt, but his fighting name was Zypher. And I was like, do you play this game? Like I know what this game is. Like I've always wanted to play this game. I played it when I was young. Like, and I'm sure he thought I was a lunatic because I talked like miles per hour. And I was like, well, is there like a group here that we play with? And he's like, well, no, I was kind of hoping to start one. And I was like, well, good, because if you have gear, I have friends, and we'll make this happen. Like this is going to be a real thing. So I ran over to Chadwick's dorm room and told him what we were doing, and he's like, great, I'll put on some sweatpants. And we started Tears Lean, which is the Ames group. Yeah, and so I fought there in Ames. And when we hit the scene, now to get back to where I was, when we hit the scene, there was kind of like this like at first everyone was like kind of feeling us out, like, are these people like fun to be around or are they not? Yeah, so there was 6 of us that started Tears Lane. Would have been Zypher, myself, a guy named Nineveh, Heimdall, Falcor, and a dude named Slepner. Yeah, they were great. They were a lot of fun. Zypher's still in Ames, I think, or he's somewhere in there. I haven't spoken to him for a while. So anyway, and then once people got to kind of know us, then like that barrier was broken. We started getting recruited to all these different units. And Hellhammer was a big recruiter. They recruited a lot of our like kind of promising younger like monster types or people who wanted to be monster types. And they had a blast. Chadwick and I got recruited to TDK, Templars Draconis Kestavaris, which they're based out of Tennessee, and then they had like a branch that was in Numenor, and we were with them for about a year. And then we ended up leaving that because of drama. And then we started a unit with some of your old pals from your stomping ground, Tanith, Damarth and Angwin.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we got to know them super well. We like essentially Armageddon 3, we hung out with them pretty much the whole time. And Damarth is absolutely hilarious. And we just had a blast hanging out with them. And at the end of the event, they were basically like, we've been talking about like starting a unit. So what do you guys think? You guys want to join a unit with us? So we started Henethanun, was the Lions. And that lasted for a while. We had a long run with that. So I ran with them and Otar. I don't know if you've ever met Otar. Did you ever meet Otar? He's an old Arnar guy.
There's so many Arnar guys that like if I saw him I'd be like, oh yeah, that guy, but like I don't remember their names because I wasn't a regular out there.
Sure. He looked like Kevin Sorbo, except like 150 pounds heavier.
I may vaguely know who you're talking about. It's possible.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. His name was James. He's huge. He's a big dude. But anyway, so we ran with Henethanun for a while, and I was squired to Damarth. And Damarth and Angwin and Brutus, the 3 of them essentially decided to step out of the game. And they Yeah, I've met Freyson on several occasions. I didn't have a lot of interaction with Freyson. It was more Sadnaka. But I do know Freyson. I met him several times. He was a decent guy. Anyway, so when they stepped out of the game, I was kind of like left with this like, well, who do I become a squire to if I want to become a knight? And I knew I wanted to be a knight. I knew I wanted to. I saw Belagarth or Dagger here as like this opportunity to make a really cool game better. I felt the best way for me to do that was to get my knighthood, so that I'd have like some legitimacy as far as trying to convince people to be like nicer to each other, like sharing information about fighting. Because I grew up in like a heavy sports background. I mean, my mother was a big time athlete, like Olympic trials athlete.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah, she's a springboard diver. And she
yeah.
dove at Indiana. So if you know anything about like water sports, back in like the 60s and 70s, that's where Greg Spitz was from, and Greg Louganis, some of the other like old time names of like Olympic swimmers and divers. And so my mom was actually placed third in the Olympic trials in 1968. So my brother Eric would have been born then in 71, 72. So she missed those trials. And then
That's wild.
yeah, so and then she didn't. I mean, she left Indiana, went to Iowa State, and that's a different story. But I grew up in like a sports family. All of us were in sports, and I thought I could like bring some of that to the table as far as what I saw in Belagarth. And so I wanted to get knighted. And after Daymar stepped out, and Henathan was kind of like a shadow of what it could be or what we wanted it to be. That was about the time that I met Bo, and I decided to squire under Bo, and we had a great time working through the squirehood. He's basically like, look, I'll teach you how to be personable, and you can teach me how to fight. And it worked out pretty good. Because I would go to events and I would fight through the day, and then everyone would start partying at night, and I'd be like, man, like, I want to go to bed so that I can fight better tomorrow. And I would just go to bed. And it made me very, like, the perception I was very antisocial, which I guess sort of I was. But that's just what it was. I wanted to fight. I wasn't there to read that that's what I wanted to do. That's what I want to spend all my time doing. And a time at events was just so precious, because it's like you get these like short little weekends where you get to fight all these people you don't normally see. And the perception then that I was just not very nice, because I just like brutalized people on the field, and then I'd disappear at night and not hang out with anyone. It didn't paint me in the best light.
Who is this man that just kicks our ass and disappears to his hotel room?
And then leaves, yeah.
What a fucking asshole. He's really a nice guy.
I know. It was terrible. So then I went pretty steady then. So then when would that have been? I guess 2006 is when I went to RAG and I met Ed the Dread. Because at the time, Dread was fighting in Maryland. He lived in Maryland and fought in Maryland. So he's kind of like the genesis of No Quarter and how they fight, or at least part of that genesis, or at least how they fight now is because of his influence. And he was the first person that I really like ran into and fought that I was like, oh my gosh, like this guy has like a system that seems to work. And like I can't just be more athletic and like kill this guy, like, because he's just better at fighting than me.
Is this Ed the Dread that was also an Amtgarder?
Yeah, no, he's Rogue Company Ed the Dread. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I'm like I know that name, but we're talking.
Oh yeah.
Bogart.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The Mongoloid. Yeah. So and of course he and I of course like hit it off, and we were super good friends like immediately. much like how you described, like when you and Horace met. We had like this like romantic weekend of hitting each other with sticks and eating at the USA Steak Buffet. So then he was like, you should really meet my knight, who of course was Spin. And I spoke to Spin, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times before I met him at a rag, like 2 years following. So that would have been like 2008 is when I met Spin for the first time. And at the time, Spin was like really in his prime in Amtgard. And Arg, his kind of counterpart in Rogue Company, had just retired, and he was like, hey, look, like, I've been really looking for somebody to kind of share the leadership with and kind of branch off into new areas for Rogue Company. And of course, he and I got along really well because he's a real comedian when he's not being mean to people. And he's an incredibly talented fighter. He's amazing.
Yeah.
And his ability to hit people with a stick is undeniable. And there's a lot I could learn there, so I kind of glommed onto that. And we spent a week together. And then after that week, the following, was it February? Is when that Wolfpack opener video old Wolfpack opener video where I came out with my low strap shield and I like brutalized Dagonoth and Winfang and some of those other guys that were supposed to be like the best fighters, and I just slaughtered everybody. And that was like when people like actually took notice, like on a national level, that I could swing a stick fairly well. And then after I graduated graduate school, Spin was going through his divorce, and he's like, I really need childcare through the summer so I can keep my kids. I was like, well, I got nothing going on this summer, so Dred's been trying to get me to come down and live with him for God knows how long. I was like, so I'll go live with Dred and I'll watch your kids during the day, and we can fun fight, and we can have a good time, and you can get through this hard time, and I can fight and take some time off like before real life starts after graduate school.
The most Texas fucking Amtgard story, by the way. Hey, let me just come live with you for a summer and learn how to fight. That's like such a Texas Amtgard story.
This is the way.
It is.
Yeah. So I lived with Dred, and then I would watch Spin's kids during the day. And Dred and I would fight like twice a week.
Jeez.
And then I would fight Spin twice a week, and then we had like a regular fighter practice where it was like the fighter practice outside Spin's apartment, and people would come. So Juicy would come sometime. Not Juicy. What's his name?
The guy that lost a ton of weight. It starts with a K.
Who was it? He had like one funny ear. What was his name? He was a green dragon.
No, that's not Brandon.
Anyway, he would come. Noah would come. That's when I met Noah. Yeah, Curb would come out sometimes.
Yeah, Curb is who I was thinking of.
Yeah. But that's when I met Megiddo, who's still one of my favorite people. That's when I met Brennan. Brennan would come out sometimes. I had met Brennan before. He had traveled to some events, but I didn't know him well. I only fought him randomly. And we'd have these like super awesome fighter practices. But anyway, so I was down there for like 2 months, 8 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that, before I moved back north when I got knighted in Belagarth. In that summer I went to Clan, so that Clan was my first Amtgard exposure. As far as like an Amtgard event, I went to Clan with Spin. That's when I met Leaf for the first time. And of course, Leaf gets in. I get introduced to Leaf through Spin, and Spin's like, yeah, Leroy, this is my buddy Aaron. He's one of the people we're training up, and at the time, I don't think I had joined. No, I guess I had just freshly joined Rogue Company, like that August. He's like, he's new to Road Company and whatever, and so he was like, yeah, sure. So he gave me like special time, like off to the side, and we fought, and I was fighting him sword board against his sword and board, and I remember like within 10 fights, there was this crowd of people that had like gathered, and they were looking at me like I had 6 heads, because I was like this complete unknown that like showed up out of nowhere, and was competing with one of the best in the game, and holding my own, and it was. I didn't realize how significant it was at the time because he was just this super fast guy wearing green that I had just been introduced to. So anyway, I had a great time. So that was my first Amp Guard exposure, my first Amp Guard event. I came back to the Midwest then, or at least the proper part of Midwest, not Texas. To start my job at Stonehouse Park, and I got knighted that October in Bellegarth. The following year, then so that would have been like March, I think, is when Rising Winds had their first tournament. So I fought my first Amp Guard tournament in that March of 2010. Is there maybe February or March? I think it was March. And then I ended up getting my Warlord then in November of 2010 after a few more tournaments.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that fast?
It was
pretty quick.
It was really quick. And like the hubbub, I remember, I can interject the Amp Guard point of view, because if you remember when we talked about Belgarth, at that time, the Amp Guard perception of Belgarth fighters was not a very generous one. Amp Guarders were like, man, Bell guys are just, big old dudes with big shields and flails, and, they all suck and all this stuff. And so all of a sudden, there was like all this like whispering of like, but there's this guy, Peter the Quick, now that is really good. And that doesn't make any sense, and everybody's like confused because there's this Belgarth guy that's like whooping everybody's ass, but it's like, but he's Belgarth. I don't understand, And then it was like you basically were like, well, I'm kind of an Amp Guarder now, and then got your Warlord like, in kind of the general scheme of things like right away. And so everybody was like, did he get shoveled? Is this because he's somebody's friend or something? Like there was some discussion about it, and then people that fought you was like, no, he's actually really good. So there was a lot of controversy around it at first, but then that like died down once people got to know you and fight you and meet you.
Yeah. And that, what's funny is that sort of carried because there was, at the time I was part of Rising Winds, right? Because Polaris hadn't been formed. And after I left Stonehouse, I moved back to the Quad Cities where I live now, which is even further away from Rising Winds. Mm-hmm. And so I could participate less because it changed it from like a 3.5 hour drive to a 5-6 hour drive, like to go to an event. And I met my now wife and had like a real big boy job where I was working a lot. And so like my life circumstances sort of changed, and that kind of caused like the resurface of, well, he's just a Bellegarth guy that got an Amp Guard award. And so I never did any of the Amp Guard events I wasn't going for the awards. So it didn't really affect me. I wasn't upset. I was never like discouraged. Didn't make me like not want to participate. All I ever wanted was to meet awesome people and fight really good people and try to be better than I was the day before. And at the same time, just try to lift everything up around me. Like that was my goal. It probably didn't help that I was part of Road Company as well. Because they didn't have the best reputation for various reasons. Mm-hmm. Which I worked to change. So then fast forward, to 2012 is when I was asked to join FLAC. I also, for let's say creative leadership differences, we decided to part ways between Road Company and myself. And my northern boys, we started the Amir. which just like Brandon said, like when I started the Northern Rogues, it was I collected all my Dragon Balls. I basically like handpicked all of the people that
Mm-hmm.
that I thought could embody what I wanted to do. Because you can teach anybody how to stick, right? Like
Yeah.
that wants to put in the time. You can teach anybody how to craft or how to make nice garb or how to conduct themselves. But the one thing that you can't teach is that like hunger to always want to be fighting. Like we've all been in fighting companies where you kind of at one point or another you look around and you're like, why am I the only person who's excited about fighting?
Yes.
This
Yes.
shouldn't be this way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted to surround myself with people that love fighting so much, because most of the time I get this like weird like out of body experience when I meet somebody who loves fighting as much as I do, because they show up, and I'm like, why do you show up? Like, what is it that why is it that you're fighting? Like, why is this the lifestyle for you? I mean, much like it is for me, but like it was so like foreign for me to find that on a regular basis
Mm-hmm.
that it almost made it like hard for me to wrap my head around it, because I was like,
You say foreign to find that on a regular basis. Do you mean like somebody in Belgarth that has that like I want to fight all the time attitude, or do you mean like you found those people in Belgarth, but in real life it's hard to outside of Belgarth it's hard to find that?
no, I mean like within any of the foam games.
Okay.
Like you find, because there's always the people that show up to events and it's like the same faces, but
Mm-hmm.
of those faces there's just such a small percentage of people that actually want to get better at it and are prepared to put in the time and the work and want to like live and breathe it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like this like I said, like I almost didn't really know how to, when I find it in the wild, like I almost don't know how to internalize it, because I'm like, man, like I'm not Bigfoot, like these friends of mine that our Single Blue
Mm-hmm.
Fight Club, like we're not alone. It's like almost like amazing, like you find an alien like living in the universe with you.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the kind of people I wanted to surround myself with. So when I collected the Northern Rogues, everyone was either my age or younger at the time, and then we recruited Cyrek, who's slightly older than I am. And since then it's kind of changed and grown and adapted, obviously, but we still kind of hold to the same like original theme theory,
Mm-hmm.
where it's we all just want to fight. We get together and it's like we make all these plans to like fight and then do something else, and we never end up doing that other thing
Just fight.
because
fight.
we just fight. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Or,
Yeah, we'll stop in 30 minutes, an hour later.
yeah, and an hour later when you're like salt depleted,
Yeah.
oh man, we actually have to go to this like bachelor
Yeah.
party. Like, oh,
Now that
man.
we've run like 5 people down into the ground and they can't move anymore, they're like, all right, we want to go get food. Let's go.
Yeah.
I remember one time in an RW event, because I was like that when I was younger. My health and injuries kind of tamped down on my fighting time a little bit, but I'm still out there all the time. And my buddy Wilhelm was out there at a Rising Winds event one time, and me, Wilhelm, and Monkey were sparring each other. Literally, as we're getting into the car to leave, we're still like one more, one more, one more, and I'm like, dude, we gotta go. It is time. One more, and then hop in the van and take off.
Yeah. But that addiction, like that's what it is, right? Like,
It is.
But anyway, back to the story. Like I participated in my first 9 before. Was it before? No, it would have been 2010. That spring. So it was before I had my Warlord, but after I'd had a little bit of exposure. I might have the dates reversed a little bit. I don't remember. But that's when I met like some of the old the fighters where I'd watch video. You know, I watched the old advanced sword and board video of Delos and Arthon, and I'd seen like little snippets of video because back then there wasn't a lot to view to find because cell phones didn't have cameras.
Yeah.
And people were cagey. People didn't want to share. If they knew something, they'd keep it to themselves, and you had to figure it out by watching them.
Yeah, exactly.
So glad gatekeep culture's dead.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But I met that section of the fighting culture, and that really like invigorated me drastically because I was like, it was all of a sudden there was this whole community of people, and maybe they recognized in me what I recognized in them. But you know, I was an outsider that was asked to teach at SKBC because Spin said that I had the chop, and all the instructors and the staff and FLAC, they all instantly befriended me. You know, they were super inviting. Like the community that they had amongst themselves was amazing. And so SKBC has always kind of held like a special place for me because of that. You know, then the following, and then the next SKBCs, of course, I would have had my Warlord, so I would have been invited as a legitimate instructor on that merit. And then in 2012, when Kesgar stepped down from FWAC, I was asked to join. And after a little bit of hesitation, I jumped on the opportunity. And I've been on FWAC ever since. And I'll, you know, continue to push that mission until I either, you know, due to work life, family, or other obligations, it'd be better served if somebody else did it other than me. But, you know, I'll continue that tradition. I think that's helped fighting as a whole, and I'll keep that going. But SKBC has given me the blessing of seeing these multiple generations of amazing fighters like grace the game, and so I've kind of been able to have this. I've been able to be like an ambassador between that community and Belagarth. Like the Amp Guard community as a whole in Belagarth, like kind of like bringing forward this idea of cross gaming and how we're all stronger together. And you know, I try to still do that, although I'm just not active enough really to matter, I don't think. But you know, the beauty of being an SKBC instructor is like the exposure to the talent, the exposure to the ideas, and then to be able to bring your ideas to other people and help refine what you already do. So SKBC is great. Being on FLAC has been really great. Yeah, and then 2018, I got my sword belt at Keep after winning my second Keep tournament the year before and joining Polaris, starting my Amguard park here. Mirror Perennial, which is basically dormant now. I just don't have the ability to run practices. I don't have the time.
Dante went to that, right?
Yeah, so that's when I met your boy Testicles. Like
Yep.
he lived in Iowa City, and he would travel to my house. We'd practice on Wednesday nights. So we would practice until like we'd start at 9 o'clock after my kids went to bed. We'd fight until 11:30 midnight under my lights, and then they would just drive back to Iowa City. It was so him and Dante, and who else? Miriam would come out. Fiddles would come out. Yeah, we just had a great little fighter practice. And before they came out, when I was running Mirror Perennial before Testicles moved up north with his now wife, I would hold a fighter practice where I would have a dude named Logan and Roland, who fights with Spin now in SCA, and they would come from Des Moines. So they would come from Des Moines. Arc would come from Champaign. Trogdor would come from Chicago. And so these guys are all driving like 3 hours to converge on my house. And we'd fight on a Wednesday night at 9 p.m. under my lights. And then they would all head home at like midnight. And I'd go to bed. It was amazing.
Wild.
Yeah. But we were all on that. We were all on the hunt, you know, that was back then. So yeah, so since my knighting, my sword belt, I've continued on FLAC, and the Emir survived COVID, and I feel like we're, you know, thriving. We've recently picked up a new member, and yeah, I hope to hit as many events as I'm able to now that I have my own business and can be a little more flexible.
So that's I'm gonna kick it over to chat because I know that they probably have questions for you, and while those questions are stacking up, I guess that's my first question for you is what's next for Peter the Quick? Like where do you go from here?
So where do I go from here? Well, I'm 41 years old. I have suffered. Geez, since I've been fighting, I've had an ACL reconstruction. I had a microdiscectomy in January, which is a back surgery. And you know, at this point, fighting has always kind of been like my outlet to stay competitive. You know, like I was a collegiate bound athlete until I hurt myself. But fighting has always like allowed me to be, from that point forward, it's always given me a reason to stay fit, to stay physically active, to challenge myself as far as like a martial art or a game. You know, so I continue to fight until the wheels come off. Now, the consistency in which I can fight will kind of like slow down on how relevant I'll be, which I'm not concerned about. I've never fought to be, you know, to stand on top of the mountain and tell everyone else that I'm better than them. I've always fought for myself, selfishly, hitting other people with sticks. And then, of course, like, I always had the view, I say that, like, I teach a lot, right? Like, I've always thought, like, even me teaching is sort of like a selfish act, because if I can teach Horace to do what I do, you know, or Myst D or Tanith, if I can teach you guys how to do what I do, you can turn around and then do it better than me. And then I'll have to address that, and I'll have to make myself better to beat that. So, like, that was always kind of my goal. Like, if we all raise ourselves up together, we're all gonna be better. It's gonna make me better. Yeah. So, what's next for me? I mean, my oldest is 9, so we're in a lot of sporting stuff for them. So, I plan to be the best dad I can be. I have my business that I want to run, and fight as much as I can, really.
Yeah.
I play soccer on a weekly basis still. Well, that's about it.
So your business, do you want to talk about that at all? Because I know that some amp guarders have utilized your business with great results.
Yeah. So I have a custom jewelry business where I make, you know, whatever you want. So please, if you're in the market for jewelry, or even like you're like, hey, I'm looking at buying such and such thing, is this a good price? You know, feel free to hit me up. I'll be happy to help any way I can. I'm easy to find on Facebook. I'm the only Aaron Dorder on Facebook.
I'm realizing.
It's like an evolutionary failure that the only Dorders are my immediate family. Yeah. Oh, did you just post my?
I did.
Business page. Yeah. Please like. I post like videos of how I make stuff, so it's kind of fun. Yeah. Yep.
I'm realizing now that my girlfriend who watches this stream is going to be like, oh, he's going to do our engagement ring. I know right now. So I'll probably end up having to be messaging you in the future.
Yeah. My prices are fair. So
yeah.
I'll be gentle.
I was giving Amish Ninja some trouble, but they're apparently 41, so they're allowed to say that. Let's see, we're looking for some questions for y'all. What questions do you have for Peter the Quick? While those are loading up, I'll ask you another one. It was Warlord in 2010.
Yeah,
Sword Knight in 2018.
I think so. I think that's when
Okay.
it was. Yeah.
That's quite a gap. What was that? Was that because you were splitting your time between Amtgard and Bell, or what was that about?
Um, I mean, part of it's like the whole, like you take your warlord, right, and you're given, a sword belt.
Hmm.
Um, so I could clearly fight, but the Amtgard community, I think, wanted to see me in a knighthood role, like before they would give me a knighthood, and when I could make it out, so when I couldn't make it out as much as was expected of somebody for a sword belt, um, I wasn't ever really like brought up to the table, and that's totally fine. Like it's totally like I wasn't doing it for the award.
Hmm.
Um, I cherish my sword belt, of course, and the ceremony and everything else will be some of my fondest memories, but I was never reward hunting.
Hmm.
And so I never really pushed for it either. I never pestered people. I never advocated for myself. I think Delos like finally bullied M-Hog into, you know, in between him and Megiddo and Brennan, I think they all kind of finally like bullied the Polaris Knights Council to get it done. Um, but yeah, I mean, and to my knowledge, I don't think I think I might, I don't know, I don't know, I might, at the time when I got knighted, I was the only person to be knighted in the two games.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's still true or not, but that
I,
was
I
kind of a fun
I
fact.
don't think so. I think, is it Collister? I know somebody RW. It's either
Did
Collister.
Collister get his sword belt?
I don't know.
Oh
I don't
no,
know.
no. Let's see. No, shoot. Bell might be the first one, and I
Might
knighted
be.
him in
Yeah.
Amtgard.
Yeah.
If it was Bell, then I knighted Bell. So
Nice.
I should have known that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think I'll be a dual game knight come Armageddon of next year. Getting knighted
All right,
in Bell at
excellent.
Armageddon next year, and we're doing it live. We're gonna do it. We're gonna be doing the show the whole time. That's the plan. That's the plan. Light Fennec asks, how did you balance your personal life with fighting?
How do I balance? How did I or how do I?
Both, either or.
Um. So my wife, she doesn't truly understand what fighting is for me. My physical outlet. And she's also, I mean, she's awesome. She's super mom. And she's always very supportive of how I want to spend my time. Like she's not controlling in any way. So she's always made it really easy for us to find that balance. Um, but the hardest part is like, I love my kids, man. My kids are awesome. And I want to spend as much time with them as I can, especially while they're young and want to hang out with dad. That's going to change when they get to like 13 years old, 12 years old, 10 years old, whatever it is. So, it's all, I mean, life is a balance of how you spend your time. Your time is your only commodity that you can't get back in some other way. And yeah, it's just a balance, like, like how did I balance it, especially when they were younger and I was fighting on a regular basis. I was fighting in my backyard after they went to bed, so I prioritized them, and then I could prioritize myself. And luckily, I had the friends and the people who wanted to fight with me that were willing to facilitate that. So, it's a give and take. You just do what you got to do to. Your family's got to be the most important, and then everything else just kind of follows.
Technopop asks, and I don't know if this is a serious question, but we're going to ask it. What's the best way to get Popeye forearms?
What's the best way to get Popeye forearms? I happen to work with my hands, so I mean that helps. When I was younger, I used to swing a hammer a lot because I was in art school to make metal art, and I would, yeah, I would, and so I just swung a hammer a lot. I was making like like, vessels out of sheet metal and just exercise.
Do you guys know about the boffer muscle in your hand? So
The
like
boffer muscle
there's
in
a
my
boffer. So this muscle. So here's my hand. This right here. See how it bulges out right there? If people that do a lot of sword
the
fighting,
gripper.
yeah, the gripper muscle. When you do a
Yeah.
shit ton of sword fighting, that muscle grows. And if you look at like normies' hands, like they'll flex, they have nothing there. It's like it's a divot. But like if you look at ours, you got this big bump right here. That's how you can tell if somebody sword fights.
That's wild.
It's wild. Just do it. Do a little stretching, and you'd be like, oh shit, look at that.
Yeah, see, that's my like. I use pliers every day, so that's probably not really a fair comparison.
That's fair. That's fair. There's a commercial. Oh, we can still ask some questions during.
It's a lovely commercial. Applebee's.
I think it's different for everybody. So
Yeah, we got
is it?
progressive.
and if you have
Yeah,
if
it
you
is
have a
different.
subscription, you don't get commercials at all.
Oh, it's Dan Campbell is a waiter at Applebee's. It's lovely.
Oh,
Nice. Let's see. Next question. So we know what your favorite weapon combination is. What is your least favorite weapon combination?
I did.
I think his kids just showed up.
We lost them.
Okay, my
was-
least favorite weapon combination. My favorite weapon combination has got to be single sword.
Not two stick.
Not two stick.
You
I'm
know,
not surprised.
two stick. I spend so little time fighting two stick. I don't. It's always funny to me that people are shocked. Like, all right, two stick. I'm obviously accomplished at two stick, but I could actually be like really good at two stick if I actually practiced. Every time I fight two stick, I'm like, oh my god. If I practice that,
Okay.
like, that could be awesome.
Oh my god, fuck you.
All right, let me just go ahead and retire right now. I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, look, see, Delos just said it. Like, little known fact, Peter is a better sword and board than Flo.
Really?
Like, I fought way more sword and board. Maybe not now. Now that I've probably like equaled it out by now.
Interesting.
But yeah, single sword is probably
Yeah.
my favorite category.
What do you hate using?
In a tournament, I'm probably better at two sword. What do I hate using? So I really enjoy pole and red, even though I don't use them very often. What do I hate using? I mean, if I'm fighting, I'm having fun.
Okay.
I'm probably the least fun if I'm arching.
Okay.
But yeah, no, realistically, I'm probably not better with the shield's my weakest category at this point.
What's your least favorite weapon to go up against? Like somebody lines up and you're like, oh Jesus.
Sword and down spear, like sword and Madu.
Okay.
Oh yeah. It's rough.
So
Yeah.
sword and down Madu specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't care less if you have like a little stumpy Madu on your shield.
Hey now.
But which I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that it's a lot less scary to be stabbed than
That's
a
fair.
4-foot pole.
That's fair. What do you hate about it?
I don't necessarily hate it. It's just very challenging.
Okay.
It's I mean, you don't see it in Bell, so my exposure to it's probably is less than other categories. But it forces you to fight at a third level of distance. You know, because if you're fighting with swords that are normal length, like it'll be you have a distance that you fight in that you're out of range, and a distance that you fight in once you're in range, and then a distance that you fight in where you can hit each other in the body. This is my son Elliot here.
Hey, Elliot.
This
What's
is
up,
my
buddy?
other son Calvin. Where? You wave?
A little quick.
Yeah.
Oh,
And all right, go on. I'm in the middle. Go. Oh, thank you. That's a lovely hug. Go. Eat your dinner. Here, take these.
Adorable.
All right, please shut the door. So it creates like a third level. So it's like it makes it just a little more complicated.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What things do you do outside of Amtgard and Bell in terms of fitness and strength to support your game? I know you mentioned soccer, but what
Yeah, I
are
play
some-
soccer on a weekly basis. And that's great. The cardio for that's great. The sprinting that's required in soccer is great. I have a workout routine that I used to stick to like very strictly and rigorously. A lot of plyometrics, a lot of jumping rope, just a lot of cardio, a lot of running. Since my back surgery, I've run a lot less and I walk a lot more. I did a class once with Glenn where he talked about how he walks a lot, and he used to run, and it's just so much easier on his joints that now he walks, and he walks a lot. And that kind of especially after my back surgery, that really resonated with me. So I walk my dog. It's great. I still run when I feel up to it, but anymore now I'm doing like interval sprints for sprinting to help with soccer.
Okay.
And yeah,
Walk every day and stretch every day.
Walk
That's
every
what
day.
we learned.
I
From
stretch a lot,
every day.
and now they say that I stretch like a crazy person. And then I recently started my 3 sons are in a Kuksul Wan class 2 days a week, and I recently started doing that with them. So that's been
What
a
is
lot of
that?
fun. It's a Korean martial art that it's striking and kicking and stuff. It's more similar to karate than taekwondo,
Okay.
but it also has like grappling. So there's a lot of like jiu-jitsu that's built into it and stuff. And
Cool.
maybe that's just our instructor, but we do kind of split our time between grappling and striking.
Last question I think we're going to field. Do you, or at least in terms of your backstory and lore, do you do any other crafting, like garb or leatherworking or anything like that outside of your jewelry making?
So I've kind of dabbled in all of it. I used to make all my own garb until Lady Armstrong got so good that I wanted to support her, and her stuff was amazing. So she made most of my garb that I wear today. But yeah, leatherworking. I've done enough leatherworking to kind of know my way around, like what does what sort of features, or how would you go about doing it, enough to steer a squire in the right direction on where they should go to learn, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But weapons, for the most part, I build all my own weapons. I'm big into sword tech, shield tech,
Make
foam.
crazy swords.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for telling us who you are and going into your history and answering these questions.
Yeah. Sorry, that was really long.
No, that was beautiful. I was literally messaging Horace on the side saying, "This is fucking great, man. This is awesome." Like that was fantastic. No, that was a good story. So we learned who is Peter the Quick. We already know who Myst D is. So we're gonna move on to our next topic. Why do you two-stick? We're gonna start things off with Myst D and ask Myst D, why does she two-stick?
I think that 2-stick is probably the highest skill cap of the weapon sets. And for me, it's the place where I can find myself for expression in my other combat sports. So like the mentality behind boxing comes out a lot more with 2-stick than it does with like say sword and board or red sword. Yeah, just a lot of fun. I love the expressive. I love being expressive. I love expressing myself in fighting, and you have a lot of opportunities for that with, especially in our game where we don't need these perfect like blade accurate shots. You can be goofy and have like come at it from very weird angles from multiple sides. Just it's great.
Horace, why do you two-stick?
Oh man. I two stick because when you have two hands, right? And single sword is basically like throwing away stuff that you could be doing. But I don't think that the longer that I fought, the more that it got boring to fight with a shield. Like I actually kind of get what you're saying about, my board's probably better, but I don't actually really like fighting with my board. Like being closer to being hit is more fun. Like, and being able to hit them with both hands is more fun. Like that kind of line where you're really only surviving because of your skill. You're only surviving because you've tricked them or you've blocked them out, and then you get on top of them and like they're just really screwed at a certain point. Like you get too close to them and it's over for them. So I just really enjoy the closeness to death. It feels
Right.
better when you win.
There a lot of your I've noticed a lot of your explanations of why you do certain things or what you enjoy about certain things. It's always like, I could get hurt. I could get hit by people. I'm closer to death. It's an
Yep.
interesting perspective. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Peter the Quick, why two stick?
Um, it's a good question. Um, two stick is really fun. Like similar to what Horace said, I having that kind of like immediate danger where you're always at like the edge, um, is really fun. Um, fighting two stick against boardmen is particularly fun. Um, when I met Dredd a long time ago, you know, he was the first two sworder that just clobbered me. I mean, he slaughtered me, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. I was so excited. I was like, I'd never seen anything like it. Um, and he said to me, he's like, a good two sworder should beat a good boardman the majority of the time. I was like, yeah, you're probably right. It's like, so I should probably figure this out.
So he's to blame.
Yeah, and it's fun, like Sword and Board has like a tradition with it that's um like there's so many really good boardmen that have played the game, and there's so few like really good two sworders that have played the game.
Especially
It
in
seems like
Belgarth specifically.
Mhm.
yeah in Belgarth, and even in Amtgard it would be like you do like a poll, like who's the best sword and boarders, who's the best two sworders, who's the best poles, who's the whatever, right? um who's the best single sworders, and then there'd be the list of boardmen within like the top like 10 to 15. There's consistency within that, but where people put them like in that order, there's a lot of variance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you ask like who's the best two sorter, and it's always like the same like three people get named, and then they're like, well, and if you got to get five, you include this person and this person, right? Like and single sword was always like, all right, well, it's the same like three people at the top, like Spin, Leaf, Brennan, and then you'd have like this list of other people who happen to be really good at sword fighting. And so two sword is kind of like a talent gap.
Mhm.
And it looked like an opportunity for me to try to develop something that was less developed. So that was kind of my draw to it. And plus it's very fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fun. So fighting board is a patience game, where fighting two sword is like a butt pucker game. It's like just a totally different thing.
Pickles EBF says, I used to bribe archers with candy when I saw Peter on the other side of the field with two sticks.
Yeah, I 100% believe it. I believe it.
So why do
Yeah.
why do I two stick? For me,
Yeah, why do you two
how
stick?
do I two stick? Two stick for me is a cerebral game. It's so much. all fighting is cerebral at the top end. You can't just go at it on autopilot. That's how you get slayed. You got to think your way through fights. And I think cerebral. I think single sword, but two stick especially, is probably the most cerebral of all of them. You have, because there's things you can do, there's combos you can throw, there's muscle memory things you can drill, but there's also just ways that you can use those sticks in harmony to create openings, to to defend yourself, to create a cloud of bullshit that you're killing your opponent through if they fall for it. It's just so much more of a thinking person's fighting game than a sword and board. And that's not to say that other combinations don't have the level of thought and thinking required to use them, but I don't know, two stick just stands out to me, as just the thing that you really have to be mentally on your game to be good at two stick. And some, there's been times for me specifically where I'm tired, my body's not working, I'm distracted, or I'm thinking about other things, and it's I'm not going to fight well two stick. It's not going to happen. So I'll pick up the board, and it's less thinking, it's less concentration required. So that's one thing I really love about it, is that it's just a cerebral game. But then on top of that, if you're feeling sharp, if your brain's working, you can make things happen with two stick that you can't do with a sword and board. You can just do so much more when your body and mind is in harmony, because there's just what if you're feeling squirrely enough that your defense is working, and you can get your blocks in, you can just do so much more. You have two swords, and even with sword and board, even though you have this big plank that you can use to create angles and openings and all this other stuff, you can just do so much more with the second sword. That's why I do it. And I enjoy it. It's a good time. Let's go to our agenda. We talked about why do we two stick. So now let's say, what is our flow philosophy? What is your flow philosophy? Anyone want to go first on that? Nose goes. All right, I'll go first. What is my flow philosophy? And trying to back that up from what is my general fighting philosophy. I find myself, especially when I'm fighting right-handed boardmen, I find myself really wanting to go at two angles. I want to go, and that's... Did I just lose somebody? Nope, I hear you now. I find myself really wanting to attack two zones a lot. I want to go board side shoulder up, and I want to go low with my left hand towards the sword side. And that's kind of duh, but we're trying to give these basics out to people. I love stabbing in that pocket on the left side, and so that's my kind of general philosophy, is okay, I can do a lot of stuff here, I can do a lot of stuff here. That's one of the ways that I approach things. The second thing I start thinking about in terms of flow philosophy is, can I overwhelm them? Can I get in some good blocks, start attacking, and then build up enough momentum with the shots I'm throwing that my two swords are going to just do more than your one. And as soon as I get that momentum, as soon as I get that, as soon as I'm +1 on you, you're going down, because there's no way you're blocking all this. And then I'd say that's kind of just as far as a general philosophy. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, how can I work my two zones that I really like, and how can I maybe overwhelm? While I was coming up and learning how to flow fight, people used to make fun of me because it was just you just kind of charge in there and start swinging at people. That was what people said a lot, because I try to go in there and try to just overwhelm with shots. That's my philosophy. Horace, take it away. What's your two stick philosophy?
Yeah, I think of just two stick like just fighting, but it's sort of like a more single sword philosophy where it's death by 1,000 cuts. The idea isn't that I'm just gonna walk up and start wailing on them with both hands. It's that it's easier to attack their weakness, because if you're a boardman and you have your right hand and they leave their shield side, or or sword side hip open. If you can't throw that shot like a money or a dark side, it's kind of hard to hit them. Or if they just have a certain weakness, like it can be obvious that you're attacking it, it's just hard to kind of side hip. You can bait them into doing something and then hit them in their hip with your left hand. You can, bait like you're going to do that, you can hit them with your other hand. So it's a lot of misdirecting them like that, and sort of fighting this like single sword fight that you then have the other swords. So you almost get them to like do the single sword fight, and then you're like, surprise, bam, and hit them with the other one. So I tend to do a lot of stuff like that and like chop for people's forearms a lot. I don't know why, but I hit people in the legs a lot, two stick too, because there's like a lot of stuff that you can like chop their leg and then just dodge in a way that you can't with your board, because the balance of it like puts you in a position where you can't really like move the way that you want to move, because if you move that certain way, your shield has to follow you and come with you, and so you always have to like then recenter it. And when you're two stick, it's a lot easier to move your whole body where you want it to go, because your swords weigh nothing. Like they don't really need to come up with you. You can always drag them out behind you. So I just really like it because you can move more and move around more. And then when it comes to field fighting, you're the flanker. It's kill this guy on the edge, because every guy on the edge that you run into really fast where you're closing in on them, you make them make a decision like, which side am I going for? How am I going to hit you? And then whatever they do, you block it, you step into them, and you just beat the hell out of them with both your swords. And then you just continue to do that down the line. But every next person that's not the edge of the line is more surprised and makes a more difficult decision of, what do I do? Oh, I swing one way, I block that one, and then they die. So it's kind of like, when you're fighting in like a duel or on a tournament or something, it's more of a thinking game. That's the thinking how to outwit them. And then on the field, it's like, I'm a missile and I'm gonna kill as many people as I can until somebody gets me, and just never stop. Because if you stop for a second, unlike with your board, you can put it behind you, block a shot. If you stop two sticks, somebody's gonna hit you. You just got to keep going.
Peter the Quick, what's your flow philosophy?
It kind of changes depending upon like the scene, right? When I'm fighting in a tournament, it's totally different than if I'm fighting on the field. If I'm fighting a ditch, it's totally different than if I'm fighting like a line fight in like at Armageddon, for instance. Plus it also kind of depends upon how many people Pickles is bribed with candy to shoot me. I get a lot of people shooting at me. But for the most part, when it comes to tournaments, my goal is to never give the other person the opportunity to hit me. So I'm going to have one of my swords between their weapon and me at all times. And if I can never give them the opportunity to hit me, then there's no way for me to lose that fight. I'm going to survive. It has to do with, it all starts with controlling my range, so they're never within range to hit my body. So I can fight their arms with my arms. The field fighting, like especially on like a big field, like at a Belgarth event, or like a massive ditch, that you occasionally find at an Amcard event these days. And the level of people that I'm fighting against, it's really fun to fight multiple people at the same time. It always has been for me. There's something I've enjoyed a lot over the years. So I'll like put myself in situations where I have to fight, 2-3 people at a time and try to survive, and try to kill them. And that's really fun. But even then, it's like, all right, using range and positioning, how can I basically never give them the opportunity to actually hit me? They can interact with my swords, but if I keep my weapon in between them and me, then that's the goal.
Misty, what's your philosophy?
For two sword, I really like a heavy use of angles, taking steps with your shots. I really like
I'm gonna pause there.
stunting on people.
Tell me
Okay.
tell me about using angles. Unpack
So,
that
like,
just a little bit.
Yeah. So like just a simple example would be like just like a flat wrap across the chest might hit a sword, but if you step out to the side with it, you're now like aiming towards chest, or like same with like wraps on the outside, chops, whatever. Just taking a slight step in order to change the beginning and end location of your shot.
Okay.
And like playing with angles is one of the bigger things that it's you're ready to step up into the next level of first starting to get good.
Mm-hmm. And then you said you like stunting on people.
Yeah. I really like learning people's range
Okay.
and then fighting them with my hands down as much as possible.
Okay.
There was one moment at, I think it was Geddon. I was fighting with Horus, and he kind of went for like an atomic scissors trying to clap, and I just stepped back, and it just right in front of me, like an inch away from my tummy. That's that shit for me in two stick. If I could like perfectly have your range down so that I know my I'm in a bad position, it's just a step back or like a placement of the swords for defense to be defensive. Love that stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. Angles and be really good looking when you fight.
That's the I remember Delos telling me at some Amtgard event a really long time ago. He said something like, "It's not whether you win or lose; it's if you look good doing it." And I was like, "Okay, that makes sense."
So true.
That's a tagline for him, I think.
It is. It really is. So that's our flow philosophy. Let's talk about tips and tricks. What are some Florentine tips and tricks? I'll start us off. People always talk about, well, I would fight two stick, but my left hand is useless, right? And there's so many ways, and that's like my shirt is wide open. I didn't realize that. Oops, sorry. That's something that is a fair thing to say. Like, if you don't know how to fight with your left hand, it's gonna be hard to fight Florentine. And I think a piece of that too is like, if you don't do any, like, if you just go in there and say, well, okay, I'm gonna use two swords and I'm gonna fight with them, and you've never worked your left hand before, well, you're just going to go in there and you're going to fight sword and board with your right, and then you're just going to poorly block things with your left and get torn apart. So I think one of the hints and trick... did I just lose everybody? I just lost everybody. Oh, and they're back. All right. Sorry.
So one of the tips and tricks.
Sorry, bringing everybody back in here. Don't know what happened. Okay, there's Misty, and now let's get Horus. Okay, all right. Everybody's back. Sorry about that. What was I saying? Training.
Left hand tips and tricks.
Left hand training. So what really helped me, and this is not going to work in Belgarth, unfortunately, but what really helped me learn how to fight two-stick was picking up a middle Medu and fighting with that. Because when I picked up a middle Medu, it was like, okay, sword and board. I know how to do that. Fight with a punch shield. Got it. Hey, it'd be really cool if I stabbed this guy. Oh, cool. And then I start learning how to use that stab effectively when I'm fighting, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about offensive opportunities with my left hand. And then that translated, I was like, well, if I pick up a second sword and maybe start stabbing with it a lot, okay, now I can start hitting with it. And that just took me on this journey of learning how to use my left hand effectively in a two-stick environment. All started with middle Medu, because I was awful with Florentine. But you can do that. You don't necessarily have to use the middle Medu, but you can use that. You can fight. I don't know if fighting offhand sword and board would be effective. You can certainly fight single blue with your left hand and start learning how to fight with your left hand that way. You can use the down stick. You can use, there's lots of different ways that you can train that left hand up. I think a good tip would be train that left hand. Don't try to do it naturally with just two sticks in your hand. actively work on making that left hand better?
So I'm going to go next because I want to
it.
say that too. That's like the biggest thing. I actually started fighting two stick because I did a absurd single sword trial for my knight's trial that Peter came up with for his, and I used my left hand so much that I was like, well, I can fight left-handed, like I might as well just use both of them. And it really, really helps to learn to use your left hand single sword. If you can fight left hand single sword, you can start doing two stick very well because you can do all the shots with both hands. We just did a commercial, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
But yeah, using your left hand, huge for for two stick, and then or using your non-dominant hand if you're left-handed, and then you're still going to have to learn to marry those together. My second big tip is to watch Peter's videos at SKBC. I was struggling with my two stick before Oktoberfest, and I watched his most recent one, SKBC last year, before I went, and I think I just like murdered every single person that I fought two stick. It was absurd. So I'll let him talk about that more, and he already talked about it a little bit, but having one hand that's always blocking you, even in between their weapon and you, and paying attention to their weapon really helps. And then also just covering the hand that you're striking with the hand that you're not striking with, it helps so much because it reduces this mental load on you when you're fighting of needing to remember to block everything. Like having some of your passive block there so that you're always covering where you're open really helps.
So the way I'm gonna explain that out a little bit for some of our up and coming fighters, and course correct me if I'm wrong here. So like if you think about, okay, I know how to throw a shot, right? Just throw a shot. So just work that into your muscle memory that when you're fighting two stick and you're throwing a shot here, you maybe are throwing that block at the same time, just automatically throwing the block to that arm or something along those lines to cover yourself when you're throwing it. Is that's kind of what you meant?
Exactly. So like Peter's saying that when you're fighting, if you're fighting at range and you're keeping your range with them so that you can only strike each other's arms. If I swing with my left hand at their arm, even if they block it, if they then swing back at me and I have my hand over my left hand, then the only way that they can actually hit me at a range where they can only hit my arms is to go under. So now you're reducing this mental load of needing to block to, do I need to block up or do I need to block down? Because there's only really two ranges that they're coming at you from, or they're going to stab you, in which case, again, you still have this hand here and all it's got to do is go down. So you're reducing like the possible reactions of your opponent, and some of the reactions that they have to you, if they do just strike at the obvious place and your hand's already there, then now you have this free action where they're hitting you. They may have a shield or something, or they may have another stick, but your hand is free to hit them and you have the range on them because they're striking into your block.
Okay. Peter, Misty, any hints and tips as far as fighting two stick?
I'm just going to repeat the one I gave 2 weeks ago during the grind. Spend like 6 months where you are fighting single sword offhand. So if you're left-handed, right-handed, if you're right-handed, left-hand, where footwork is your first line of defense. I think that'll activate your left hand. It'll teach your body how to move at that other fighting style, whereas like maybe your right foot forward if you're from your right hand dominant. Hand matching is going to be basically forced to happen. My headphones are dying. Yeah, that was the same tip I gave 2 weeks ago.
Right. Peter, up and coming two stick fighters, what do you got for them?
I mean the left hand, that's super important. If that's whatever your non-dominant hand is. I've at this point in my fighting career, I've probably fought 3/4 the amount of time with my left hand. Or I'm sorry, like if you broke up how much I fought, the majority of what I fight, I would say 70% of all of my time fighting since, especially since like 2008, 2007, has been with my left hand. And even with that, my right hand is still far better than my left hand. But it's just like continual process to improve your left hand or your non-dominant hand. And that's big, because if it is not up to the task to do the job that it needs to do within that fight, then you might as well put a shield in it. Then the only reason you should be using it is to practice with it, like if your goal is to win a fight. So exercising and learning the muscle memory of that non-dominant hand is paramount. And to really like then get into like the theory of fighting two-sword super effectively without that, I mean, you're kind of like lost, right? Because you're like, all right, well, now it's time for this left hand to do this thing. You're like, well, my left hand can't do that thing. And it's like, well, you're kind of stuck. But beyond that, I think the biggest hint that I can kind of give, the nice part about the video that Horace referenced is that class is kind of built in a way that you can kind of take the very basic idea of how I fight two-sword, and it's broken down into its most basic baseline methods so that anybody can start there. And then I kind of build a path like through the levels of the fight, and then involving the second hand, and then like how to control the distance, how to control the fight, how to control the lane. So that's a great reference. I'm very happy with that class. I think it's really good material. It's still relevant to how I fight. Some of my older classes are a lot less relevant to how I fight than they are now. I've changed a lot. But as far as like a standard tip, at the end of every fight where you find you get struck and you lose a limb or lose the fight, take a look at whatever hand is not being, whatever hand is your hand that is back. Take a look at where it is. Like freeze yourself and look at your hand. Like, so if you're in the fight and you throw a shot and you get hit, like say they return and hit down arm, like stop and look at your other hand and be like, what are you doing there? Like, why is this hand here? Why is this hand not involved or in the way, or in some way involved in the fight? And oftentimes what happens in a fight is, shame your arms into doing better. Yep, exactly.
You
so oftentimes what happens is they'll start off the fight really well. They'll lead with their left hand. They'll throw a shot with their left hand, and they'll throw a shot and their hand will go down, and then they'll be fighting like this for like 2 or 3 shots with their right hand. And then once they break distance or lose the fight, then they like bring their left hand back up into the fight. It's really easy to be like, oh, and your hand goes down. Then you're like, oh, and your hand goes down. Then you bring your other hand back up. So, like, once that happens, look at your hand and be like, huh, like you really are like, posing as the Statue of Liberty, or, doing absolutely nothing, or, and video review and be like, all right, well, this fight that I died, why did I die? Where was my offhand? So on and so forth.
So there was I don't know if this is I think it's a good tip. So you can cross when you're fighting two stick, like that's okay. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people, when they're starting out two stick, they cross way too much, and it's kind of a problem. Is they and this is kind of teasing out some problems they might have with their board work too. But they go in, they're like, throw a shot, opener, high cross, high cross, high cross, high cross, or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. So what I did for my friend Keone one time is when he was a new player, and he's a warlord now, which is actually pretty cool. But when he was brand new and he was trying to learn two stick, I sat off on the side and he said, Alex, I am calling you dead every time you cross. And he's like, what? And I said, it doesn't matter if somebody hits you or not. I don't care. As soon as you cross, I'm calling you dead. So he lines up and he starts going. Dead. You're dead. Get off the field. And we did this probably for like 30 minutes. And I'll tell you, at the end of that 30 minutes, that motherfucker was not crossing anymore. because as soon as he did, I called him dead. So that's if you find yourself in a situation like that where you're just doing one thing, could be crossing too much in two stick, or you find yourself in a situation where you're just doing something you shouldn't do, and you need to stop, and you get in the fight in the moment and you can't stop yourself. Have a friend call you dead every time you do it, and you'll stop doing it. It'll take a week at the most, and then you'll stop doing it, because nobody wants to die to being called out for crossing.
They have their friends shout at them every time they cross. Yeah.
Because that social pressure, you start feeling that, and you're like, we got any more two stick hints and tips?
Oh, keep your arms
Keep them.
extended.
Don't get rid of them. Continue.
Yeah, when your defense needs to be further away from you. If you're doing this and your sword and board, your board's in front of you, you can return for every shot. But if you're two sticking and you're coming in here every single time, well, then if they step into you, you have to extend to whatever block you need to do. And if they just swing opposite, fake you once and you start doing this, you're never getting back to block over here. But if you have your arm out here and then you start moving this way, you can still move this way. It's it's not so bad. You have more defense as well from your range. Just like if you're extending your punch shield, it's extending that cone of defense. You're extending your cone of defense out. You're making them swing at your arms too, instead of swing at your body. Makes it easier for you to block. It makes it harder for them to just kill you.
I know go ahead, Misty.
When I stole from Peter at Geddon, I heard him give it to someone else, was that I think it was your hands block your arms and your blade blocks your body. I think that's what it was. I heard it in passing, and I've been trying to apply it to fighting recently, and it's very helpful. Versus trying to throw your hand up here to block. You can keep your hand out here and keep the blade covering the angle that the attack would be coming into.
Makes sense.
Are you sure it wasn't let your hands block your arms and your feet block your body?
Maybe. Like I said, I heard it in passing.
Yeah. I don't know. I could have said something like that. I don't know. It would have been sort of situational. I don't know.
So, fighting two stick. Do we go for amp guard? Do we go for the lightest swords we can? Do we go for control sticks? Same thing with Bell. Do we go for 12 ounces on the dot, weighted in the pommel? Do we go for a 14-ounce control stick? What's our stick choice?
I prefer counterweighting. Counterweight everything to the top of the unpadded handle.
I don't like making 12-ounce swords in case somebody has a scale that's off. So always a little bit more than 12 ounces just in case. But then for weighting, I think that swords should be weighted like swords, not necessarily. I know that there are people that like all of their weight in the handle, but I still like my sword to have the dynamics of a sword where it's basically I'm holding essentially a dumbbell with one weight on it, and the weight is a little bit above my hand, so that when I'm swinging the sword, it's doing the motion for me, so that when I hit them, my moment of most force transfer basically is at the tip of the sword. So that way, when I'm swinging, even if I'm not swinging through them, if I'm just swinging to the point, I still just don't want to have to swing the sword really hard to hit them. I want to just swing the sword and it goes there, and then my hand can be doing the next thing. And doing that isn't going to make it impossible to block from it. It's not going to even make it really any harder to block, but you're also going to tire yourself out less because you're not having to actually swing the full force of the sword to get force on it. The sword is doing the work for you.
Ocean Lover, so a control stick, that's probably an old amp guard term. It's
like duck sword. They might not know that one.
Sorry, my bad. So in amp guard, where there's no minimum weight on a sword, I've got swords that weigh 4.5 to 5 ounces or something like that. A control stick is specifically a sword that maybe goes a little higher, 9-10 ounces in amp guard, maybe 14 ounces or something in Bell. It just weighs more than the minimum, so that if you have a 4-ounce sword and somebody hits it, it might fly away. But a control stick just gives you more power on the block, lets you kind of bully their swords around a little bit. It's kind of a classic argument of like, do you use the pixie stick or do you use a heavier sword kind of thing. So that'd be a control sword, is one that has a little bit more weight and might be weighted in a certain way that lets you use that weight to your advantage. Peter, what's your sword weighting philosophy?
In Bell, I fight. I counterweight my swords. I typically put the weight like right in my hand, and so that way like the fulcrum is above my hand. Not very far above my hand, granted. It's still a wand, but the weight is actually in my hand. In Amp-Guard, I use a lot less counterweight, but then the blades are also a little less heavy. So, I'm usually using like a 5 to 6 ounce sword in Amp-Guard.
Okay, makes sense. Let's take it to chat. Oh, while we take it to chat, hold on, multitasking here. We're gonna take it to chat. Let's see. Let's talk chat. Tell us your questions about two-stick. Tell us your questions about fighting in general. This is your open forum to ask us anything you'd like. Just about anything you'd like. While we're waiting for the questions to roll up, Horace, before we started an interesting dialogue about the name Florentine. Why do we call it Florentine? Where were we going with that?
I found it. I did some Googling. So the concept of sword and buckler, sword and dagger, and sword was popularized through some manuals translated out of Florence, Italy. It was two masters, Francisco di Sandro Altoni and Marco Docchiolini, I think. And yeah, that's because it came from Florence, Italy. It became Florentine.
Okay, makes sense.
Cool.
Let's see. We had a few questions roll in already. What are your thoughts on Flailentine?
Silly. You can't block.
I don't think the flail gives you any benefit other than having to try less, I guess. It's a crutch, in my opinion. I can outthink it.
Flails aren't real.
I'm of the opinion that I see a lot of times. I think flail can be a bully weapon. Somebody that's like maybe a mid-range fighter and they're just wanting to beat up new fighters with a flail. I don't like that. I think sometimes people using a flail at the upper end just to be interesting could be fun. Flailentine, that's the troll people, man. Or if you're playing what's the game with the dog skull and whatnot, jugging. If you're jugging, sure, you have to Flailentine, but that's my thought. Peter, what do you think? Flailentine?
I mean, I've always, it's just, flails are so much slower than a sword. Because of that speed difference, they become pretty irrelevant if you can beat somebody with your feet. And yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. You're trolling them or you're jugging. Which certainly has its place. So,
if you're jugging, that's always legit.
Yeah, it's legit jugging.
Jugging is jugging. Go for it.
Oh God, Belgarth jugging, where we get to drop kick each other and shit. That'd be super fun.
There's already so many injuries in jugging. I don't know that that's a good idea.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
There was a Belgarth or a Beltane or Equinox event. I don't remember which, but my friends Boomy and a bunch of them that have Ashland's Belgarth, we did a jugging tournament. It was great. It was awesome. It was so much fun.
20-something-year-old Charlie is like, let's go. 44-year-old Tanith is like, absolutely not. I'll ring the bell. That's fine. I'm not playing in that. Omni versus Flatblade.
Omni. I actually really like flat blades and they look cooler and they're easier to stab people with. But I use Omnis because otherwise my swords break really fast and I bruise the shit out of people. If you want to hit people harder, use the flat blade because there's there's less surface area you're hitting them with, so you'll transmit more force. You can hit them through gaps easier. It's easier to slot shot someone. Um, I don't I don't have a problem switching between them. I don't really like using flat blades because if you're hitting someone, you have to hit them with the blade, right? So then my wrist starts to like, my wrist itself is fine, but moving my wrist then hurts my elbows and stuff. Like I notice my forearm gets way more tired way faster when I use flat blades. But the real reason that I don't use them is not because of that. It's just because I literally used one at KGC, and I had a lot of people ask me to stop. So
Please
yeah,
stop.
that and they break. Yeah.
Peter?
I had a
Or Misty? No, Misty, go ahead. If you're loaded, go ahead.
early on in my fighting, I had a carbon mid that was flat, and I flatted someone, and they took like the rest of the day, and I was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like the chance of me messing up a shot and hurting someone. So I switched to omnis for everything, and like I said, being a weird fighter, being able to come at you sideways is useful.
Peter?
You know, I fought with because Omni Blades were not a thing in Belagarth until like the cross gaming became really common, and I mean, sword tech in Belagarth over the years has been very dependent upon what Gallon and Ethelin or Forged Foam was willing to make for people. So I can't tell you the number of sword ideas and things that I would convince Gallon to do, and it would take years for him to actually do it, and then it would become commonplace, like stabbing tips. You know, Henathan was making stabbing tips years before Forged Foam was making a legal stabbing tip that would be sold to the masses, and then
I lost everybody again. Oh no. They'll show up again. Right? I don't know why it's doing this. Is this my own time to talk about my life? Can you see me? Am I still here? Here, I'll let them know. Everybody rejoin. All right, everybody rejoin. Should I sing for you guys? I'm still here. Oh, they're back. Okay. All right, they're back. Let's put you back in. God, this is making me effing crazy. Why does it do this?
I don't know.
Misty. And all right, everybody's back. You were saying stab tips. We had another.
Yeah. So anyway, stab tips. So once the weapon tech for Omnis became like super common in Belagarth, like that's when it became normal to have a round sword in Belagarth. But there's like a switch goes off in my head. You know, it can go back and forth between them without any hesitation. Omnis tend to last longer, especially in the stabbing genre. You know, it's a little easier to work like under a shield or reverse wraps, things like that, with a round versus a flat. But anymore, I mostly use rounds, but I still have a couple flat blades that are super duper nice that I break out when I feel spicy and want to hit somebody hard.
I came up in Amp Guard, so I just gravitate towards Omnis normally. And because I'm thinking about, so I also have that additional brain process where I'm like, oh, I can't flat somebody, and that's like not something that is as trained in me as somebody that came up through Dagger Bell. So I stick to Omnis, especially two stick, because then it's like I don't have to do that active thinking about using the blade edge or that kind of thing. With two sticks in my hand, I can just do what I've been doing for 30 years and not have to do that extra math in my head. So it's just easier for me, I think, because of where I came up.
Sure.
Where's this question at? What do you find hard? I gotta find it. Where do we go? Where'd we go? What do each of you find harder? Flow versus sword and board? Flow versus flow? Does the style of their... Well, let's answer that, and then we'll go to the second part of the question. I don't think we each need to go through this one. I think flow versus board is probably the best, most advantageous matchup.
Yeah.
Like, and then
It's just easier to fight flow versus board because
I'm
they
the
can't
opposite.
hit you with one of their sticks.
Misty's
I
the
see you
opposite.
shaking your head, but I don't. I think flow versus flow is if they're good at flow, it's harder because you have more to worry about and more inputs to like really think about. Whereas where their board is, like, unlike if you're board versus board, if they hit me with their board, like I don't care two stick. If they hit me with their board, they're dead because I can reach around it instantly. So their board almost doesn't matter nearly as much. I find it easier to fight boardmen. I think that two stick versus two stick is harder if they're good at two stick. If they're bad at two stick, then two stick versus two stick is just easy.
I think
Because,
you have to all things being
Yeah.
equal, you know. Misty's saying no. Peter's saying no.
Yeah, I find two stick versus two stick easier because I can see everything that's going on all the time. Whereas like with sword and board, they can when they're coming under or like going to the other side angles, they can hide behind their shield. I don't have that full knowledge. There's a gap where it's then based on reactions. Also, when it comes to attacking, it's way easier to block stuff with the board than it is to block stuff with a sword. So like little twitch out sells a lot harder when they have to do it with a stick instead of a sword or instead of a shield.
Peter, what's the
I have a
easiest matchup?
I have a lot more tournament wins, two sword versus two sword, than I do like two sword on a board. It's easy for something to go wrong, and maybe it's just because I have a system that I stick with and I have a lot of success with two sword on two sword. But that's probably my most successful category.
Okay.
If history is something to be judged.
Roughest matchup, I feel like spear is no brainer, but
yeah.
Sword and down spear.
yeah, sword and down spear is rough too. I gotta find that question again. Does the style of their flow, sword and board matter in judging which is easier or harder?
Yeah.
I mean, their skill level for sure. I mean, but that's not really relevant to the actual nuance of the combination matchups.
I think the shield type more than the fighting style.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe.
Like I think a strap shield is a little easier to go against when you're using two sword because they're not as free to move their shield to the other side like you can when you have a punch shield. But that's probably just my experience.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah, because with the punch, it's easier to get them to move it, or they'll move it
Yeah.
out further.
Also fair.
I think that like that last question is sort of, do you consider somebody's skill to be part of their style? Because then it does matter a lot. But yeah, I just find it easier to fight two sword period. Like if I just want to like kill them, especially if it's 1v1, like it's just easier to get a kill on somebody two sword than it is sword and board because you just have more places you can hit them from.
If somebody got to die right now because you're in a battle game or something, just it's a lot easier to just turn on that heat.
Yeah, there's more places to misdirect them too.
Sword lengths. I think we covered this. We covered this recently, and we were, but we have new co-stars here. So sword lengths. How do we feel about different length swords?
I fight with 35s.
34s.
34s. I fight with
I don't know,
35s
man.
too. I think you can maybe do some stuff with it, but not like if I'm saying I want to be as effective as possible, I'm going to go with 235s. If I want to do something, sciencey and weird and have fun, I might go with a long sword in my left and just kind of play around with it as like a little mini downstick or something, play with that reach in a ditch line or something. But if we're talking pure efficiency, effectiveness, now same length. Do you stab with your right hand? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
if it's available.
Most people like just ask to be pocket stabbed when you're fighting on 2 sticks, so
Or hip stabbed. Yeah.
yeah. Like they're not thinking he's gonna stab me with his right hand. They're thinking his left hand's closer to me.
Yeah. And you can kind of throw a little outside with your left and angle in a stab that way with your right.
Yeah, or you can like roll your right. You can roll your right and kind of wave your left up and then poke them when they move their shield out of the way.
Let's see. Oofbar says having a heavy sword in your right hand for blocking is a real strat, though. I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't know.
Your
I've
blocking
never done
mechanics
that.
are good.
The sword that needs to travel further should be lighter.
We're in commercial.
Oh.
We can still talk during commercial. A lot of people have subscriptions and they don't get commercials when we do
Yeah. My opinion, having had 2 swords that were unfortunately not the same weight, is that you want the lighter sword in the hand that has to travel further. So if you're fighting righties, I want my light sword in my right hand, even if I want to hit them with my left more, because if I have to block, I need it to be faster. I want it in the hand that has to move further.
that. Let's see.
Both of my swords are identical, both 34 inches, both 12 ounces. And like the weight, heavier weight for blocking. If you have your blocking, like if you block your angles good enough, then the weight of theirs isn't going to matter. Like you don't need that extra weight to stump a block. If you like bone stack your blocking better.
Peter, what are your thoughts on differing weights in your swords?
I don't change the weights of my swords between my hands, but I change like how high I hold the sword on my hands. On my left hand, I tend to hold the sword a little bit higher on the handle. On my right hand, I tend to hold a little bit lower. That's really the only difference.
Why is that?
Generally, my left hand is in charge of covering my forward hip, and so having something like a little bit, further down to keep that area, give that area a little bit of an edge, is usually why that is.
Okay.
My right hand has to reach a little further because it's usually back.
Pickles asks, what specific tips do you have for somebody who doesn't fight flow often, but has to fight flow on flow for a trial? That's very specific.
Start grinding.
Do it. Don't touch anything else until your
Yep.
trial.
Yeah, fight left hand single sword so that you know how to, if you're right-handed, fight left hand single sword so you know how to swing. And then if you have to in your trial and you're mostly using it to block, then when you go to swing and if you know any shots with your left hand, it's going to shock them when you hit them with your left hand. So even if you're using it rarely, if you at least can swing your left hand, that's going to be way better than if you don't know what to do at all besides chop.
Pickles, what I would recommend doing is pretty similar, but if you go to a regular fighter practice, what I would recommend doing is, once you get there, to warm up, hit the field, fight single sword left hand, and force your left hand to be active, and that's the first thing you do at practice. And then once you feel warm, pick up that right hand and then fight 2 sword, left hand and right hand, and you'll be amazed at, like, because you've warmed up with your left hand, you've already activated those muscle responders, like your left hand will just be much more active. And then do that for a little while and then enjoy the rest of your practice. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I think that's valid. Like, actually drilling only Florentine or something like that will burn you out. So that's fair. That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Ash the Smash asked a question that we did already answer, so I'm not going to go into that again. Sorry, Ash. Just hit the rewind button. Are there any... This is a great question. Okay. Are there any stylistic differences in how the Emir and how the Rogues approach two-stick? I guess... Well, I don't know.
No.
Would Emir and Rogues, that's kind of just a continuation of that same philosophy. I mean, maybe, I don't know. That's
not necessarily. Okay, so 2 things happened that have drastically diverged what Spin and I do. The first thing that happened was I tore my ACL, and recovering from my ACL, I all of a sudden realized, like, oh my gosh, I'm not just faster than everybody else. Like, I can't move my feet quicker than anybody else. Like, my feet are heavy and slow. And I had to actually learn how to fight at range at which I controlled purposely instead of passively. And so I had to basically reteach myself how to fight. But then at the same time, Seth left foam and went into the SCA, and he fights SCA very differently than he fights foam, and he very rarely fights foam now. He told somebody at some point that I had gone off the path, and it's just, we just have different necessities. Like, I'm not trying to hit people in the head, and I'm not using rattan. So there are some differences at this point, but it's more of a difference in game, I think, than it is in like style, because we're not playing the same game.
Yeah. How do you stop new people from being so flaily with flow? Just ban them till they learn control? Any simple shots to have them focus on? You've been banned because you throw too many shots.
What does that mean? Does he like spray him like a cat, like as a water bottle?
So every single new booster group goes right, and they swing both their swords. The best thing to do is to, if you're good enough, you just walk up and block all their shots with your hand. And then when they're like, oh, I can't just like swing through this guy's guard, and after you block and then you hit them, when they're kind of done, is teach them how to swing the sword. Because most people do that stuff because they just don't know how to swing the sword at all. They do it with their shield in their hand too. They just walk up and do this at people. If you teach people how to swing the sword early, show them how to swing it like a hammer, they're not going to do that as much. Also teach them how to fight single sword a little bit. Like, tell them that people aren't having fun fighting them. However you're going to like go about breaking the news to them that nobody likes them swinging horizontally at their head over and over again. Do that, and then just show them how to fight. Like, people, if they really just want to fight and they're not going to give it up as soon as they, get any pushback, then if you show them how to hit people correctly, they're just going to do that. They're going to want to win. So yes. Show them how to win.
That's I second that. New people flail like that because compared to just standing there, it's effective. They're going to be able to beat other new people if they're just aggressive and put more shots out there than the other new person. So if you teach them how to be an effective fighter, then that flailing will go down. It's just simple math. People are going to do what works. And if you try to teach from a philosophy of like, all right, this is going to suck for 3 months, but eventually you'll be good at this, that's not going to sell, because people will just naturally gravitate into doing what works in the moment, because you want to have that little pop of of endorphin or whatever. So teach them some effective stuff. Teach them how to throw some shots, and the flailing will just work itself out. That's my thought. Peter, Misty, any thoughts?
It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to create retention, and get somebody hooked to the game, then let them flail all they want.
Misty?
But I think you said, Tanith, you said exactly what's correct. I mean, it'll eventually work its way out. I wouldn't worry about it.
A combination of the two, yes, it'll eventually work its way out, but be the wall that they run into where that no longer works, so that they now have to start thinking of something new.
Yeah.
So like, let them have their fun, but make sure that fun isn't going to get past you. They need to think in order to do that.
Jet Set RF asks, I'm more curious on the latter part. What are some good shots to practice at home if you're looking to flow? Now, I am not a peller. I don't pell. So I don't know that I can really answer that one. You're by yourself, no sparring partners. How do you get better with flow?
Well, if you're right-handed, teach your left hand how to hip wrap, how to throw for hip. You're going to swing at that a lot. Also, in a people's forearms, and then also just strike at them. But I mean, I think that with my left hand, I probably hit them flat wrap into their hand or into their arm and like hip shot the most. Um, some slots too, or just like a straight chop. But right-handed, I guess crossing flat wrap and then, I mean, if you're doing board, like all of your board shots are still gonna be valuable. Like crossing flat wrap, short cross over the board. If you can do a hip wrap as well on shield side, that's useful. You probably won't throw it a ton. And then stabs are kind of hard to, I guess they're not hard to practice home, but stabs with your left hand, it's going to be easier to stab them with your left than your right.
I would say practice essentially like the 3 methods in which you can strike a forward hand with your forward hand. So if it's your left hand that's forward, you want to be able to strike like their outside of their wrist, their inside of their wrist, and then like a crossing inside of their wrist. Practice like that as like what you can do furthest away from them. And if you can do that effectively, you'll start every fight in a safe manner if that's like your go-to beginning of a fight. That's what I would practice.
Okay. Logan Legends asks, what benefits do 35s have on a 36? I don't really have a tangible answer to that because I use 35s. They just feel better to me. I don't know. I don't know why. They just feel more right in my hand. I guess there's a tangible benefit of like if the sword expands or something a little bit, and it's just like if you're just a touch over 36 and somebody gets smart and wants to throw your sword out, you don't have to deal with that because you have a little wiggle room. But I don't know. 35s have just always felt more right to me than a 36, and I can't really put it into words. Anybody else?
I go 34s, so I have no.
I've never used a 36, yeah. I mean, the longer your sword gets, the easier it gets to land the stab. But, and the shorter it is, the easier it'll be to maneuver it around shields or other swords. But the harder it'll be to reach them. That's like, your actual length of your sword is kind of personal preference, what's easiest for you to manipulate. If you're taller, a longer sword's going to feel better. I'm 5'8". I don't want to use a 36-inch short sword. When I like hold it down at the ground, it's hitting the ground. Like I can't even swing it certain ways. So
I'd say use what's comfortable for you. Everyone's gonna have a personal preference. What feels good to you. Just like Tana said, if it feels good, then use it, and don't be afraid to let that change. I used to fight with 34s or 33s, and I'd slowly climb up in length over time, and just use what feels good at the time. And so a lot of it has to do with not only what you're currently used to, but how strong you are and how fit you are to be able to handle a longer sword versus a shorter sword that's more counterweighted. It's just kind of let it be organic.
We've got some good comments about that too. So Hale 1 says for 35 versus 36, there is a comfort balance point that happens when you are no longer comfortable sacrificing return speed for length. And Delos says it's easier to get better angles inside or over the board with a 34.5 or a 35, where at 36 it's more difficult to set those angles up properly.
For me, I like shorter because if you fight, I like fighting in red and yellow as well as green. So at green, I just supplement the size with footwork, and then at yellow and red, the shorter size lets me change angles and get around, maneuver myself easier in that position.
Logan Legends asks about flails again. Unfortunately, my friend, we just talked about that. So when I post the video, I have the answer to your flail question a little bit earlier in the chat. Oofbar says, do you have any recommendations for flow openers? I feel like I just default to full wrap with left hand and block with right hand. Flow openers. What do we got?
Yeah.
I can start us off. Oh, go ahead. Somebody got
I
something? Go
really
ahead.
like when I step and I'm kind of like testing them to see what I'm going to get them to do or what they will do, like faking with my left and then actually like hitting them with the right. Because if I do that, especially if I haven't actually like stepped with my right foot so that I'm like switching my angle, it kind of invites them to swing into like the open position is crossing on me, which is like sort of really dumb, especially if they're sword and board. If you're gonna cross into me and then I just block it with my right hand, then you're open and I can just hit you with my left and I have a ton of angles. So it's like my favorite kind of like information gathering opener is like do something like I'm gonna do something with my left, just kind of like test them with the right, and then based on what they do, kind of from there choose a shot. Because sometimes people too will be like, oh, he swung with his right hand, I can just like step in hard and hit him, and then like my right hand just drifts up and stabs them because they just walk into it. But it, I don't know that I have a ton of openers that you're just gonna immediately kill someone. Really, the opener to me is always how are they gonna fight me, and I want them to like swing at my arms. I want to do something that puts my arm in danger so that then they want to fight my arm and then I kill them for it, or I chop their arm off, and then once their arm's gone, then it's like play the drums on them.
I think like high end fighting, I'm not really thinking in terms of openers. It's just a tease to just slowly work your way into range and play with their emotions and brain, and likewise, and at the real high end it just turns into this real tease, and just a consistent opener is just going to work negatively for but then when you're fighting not at the like the high end, when you're kind of just working your way through more of your higher average fighters or just average fighters, and especially like in a ditch where you don't have time to do a big old dance with everybody to figure out how you're going to attack. I think just throwing at their hand, throwing at their board, throwing a really safe far away shot that might provoke a response of some kind, so you can immediately lean into a block to that response and then start working your two sword magic at that point. So just throwing something real safe that is pretty far away. It's not going to land, but it's just going to start that dialogue, and it's going to keep you safe. They're not going to be able to return into it because you're not really aiming for a kill either. Just starting it up, and then you're moving, you're going, you're executing whatever plan you have.
When in doubt, give him a tap. Tap, like you said, like Tannis was saying, tapping that sword, tapping the hand, just get them to do something, and then react from there. That's my go-to for openers. I'm a very counter-based fighter.
Peter, what's your openers?
My openers generally put one of my swords in the way of their sword. Okay. So that's my goal, right? If I have one of my weapons between their weapon and me, my other hand has a free action. So first thing I want to do is just put my weapon in the way. So I will put my weapon in the way, whether it's like a flat cross to their hand, or a flat cross to the edge of their shield. Then my hand's in the way, and they can return like to that. They can try to circumvent it, stay far away. Yeah, I mean, my goal on an opener is generally just put my hand in the way.
I think if you're fighting more of the low end of the skill pool,
yeah, that's a totally different answer then.
Totally different. Usually I'll just try to look for an opening visually and just snipe it, immediately. Something along those lines. If you start throwing openers where you're attacking their hands or something like that, they're a lower end fighter's not going to react the same way. They don't have those same muscle memories trained up that we're trying to take advantage of. So, you might try to throw a wrap and they're just going to step in and start wailing. You're like, whoa, what the hell. So I try to go for a quick kill, like a stab or an arm shot at range, if I'm fighting a lower end fighter. Just something just fast, easy, wrap it up. So, because that fight's probably going to happen in a ditch or something like that. So I just want to quickly end that fight as soon as I can so that I can focus on my other opponents. I think we got last question here. Do you go 100% every time you practice? Misty says yes.
Yep. Practice how you play.
Horace?
I would say that I'm like always mentally fighting 100%, but I don't like if I'm focusing on doing one thing, like I'm not necessarily like if I want to practice like me watching you swing at me, I'm not gonna practice using my feet really well to like constantly dodge in and out of your range and dodge your shots. Like I'm thinking, look at his hand, watch the hand, wait, do something when they move their hand. So I agree, like always put your whole like self into it, but I don't necessarily always like fight with all of my skills at the same time at 100%. Sometimes I'm focusing on stuff that I want to learn, or want to get better at more than other things, and that would have a detrimental effect on my like total skill level, but I think it's good in the long run to like learn those things.
Peter, you hit the gas every time?
No. If I would be lying if I said yes. It really depends on what the goal of the practice is, just like Horace is saying. Like if I'm at a practice where it's me and two other warlords, or it's like an Amir practice or something, that's a totally different animal than I have a couple people, local people over to fight, where I'm really like training them. Like for the years where Testicles and I sparred on a regular basis, it took a solid year to 16 months for him to become like a legitimate threat where I didn't just kill him with openers. And so I had to train him to step further down the ladder and survive an opener so that then we could have a real fight. But you also got to kind of know your audience. Like if you go hard in the paint every time, and the people you're fighting against have absolutely no fun because you just clobber them all the time, like they're not going to keep fighting you. So, you got to tone it down a little bit, simmer.
So I found that my advancing age has changed my answer to the question, because I think when we talked about it during the grind, I reflexively say, yeah, fight as hard as you can every time you can, because then you're training yourself to fight as hard as you can when it matters. But when I saw that question and I thought about the answer, I was like, shit, I don't go hard every time, and that's because I know I've got X amount of fights before my knee decides that I'm not fighting anymore for the night. Same with maybe my elbows or something. So like that, I think that is also kind of becoming a universal countdown. I've got so many, I don't know, thousands of fights, I hope, until my knees don't work anymore, and if I go hard in the paint every single time, then that's gonna speed that clock up a little bit. That's gonna wear out my joints. That's gonna cause me to have a heart attack in the middle of practice, which may have almost happened a time or two. But
or two.
I've been to the hospital twice for for dehydration and maybe almost having a heart attack. But I think age is changing my answer to that, which sucks. I hate it, but you got to take care of yourself, and if that means not going 100% all the time, that's what it means. But I want to thank our guests, Peter the Quick, Misty. You guys have been phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and skill with us. Thank you, Sydney. Yes, I'm not allowed to fight when it's over 85 degrees. We've made that. That's an
very
agreement
hot.
I've made. If it's over 85, I have to sit down, or I get an angry phone call from somebody. So that's a rule now. So yes. So thank you for joining us. Really
Thank you both.
appreciate it. Next week we've got we're going to be live on the scene as we discussed at EQ. We're going to have Cord doing Check Your Drip. So wear your best drip to EQ on Thursday night. Thank you, you both. And I'm gonna after I go to the outro here, we're gonna stay online because we're gonna play Space Marines 2,
Hell yeah.
and we're gonna stream it.
I love this.
But any last thoughts, Peter the Quick, Misty? Any last thoughts for us?
Be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself.
No, this was really fun. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Happy to have you.
Thank you
Anytime.
for being on.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching The Bench. We will see you next time. Don't go anywhere if you like Space Marines.